We open with a quick look at the discontinuation notice posted in the cars of the 2nd Avenue elevated trains in 1942. The portion north of 59th Street had already been eliminated in 1940, but the section from South Ferry to 59th Street and across the Queensboro Bridge continued to run for another 2 years. Here we are looking at the South Ferry station from street level. The 9th Avenue L and 6th Avenue L had their own platform here, and that had already been torn away for the most part by the time these views were made. This is during the last week of operation of the 2nd Avenue L. The 3rd Avenue L, which also shared these tracks from here to Chatham Square, would continue to operate until 1950. But we're looking at a northbound 2nd Avenue L train leaving South Ferry, heading around the sharp curve onto Front Street. Notice the semaphore in the upper right has just changed. The west side and the east side elevated lines each had their own platforms at South Ferry, comprising one island platform and one outside platform each. We're riding in a 2nd Avenue elevated train from South Ferry up to the first station, Hanover Square. A view of the stained glass windows in the station, built in the 1870s. Fulton Street Station and Franklin Square Station. Notice the BMT elevated train on the Brooklyn Bridge directly overhead. Franklin Square Station was directly under the Brooklyn Bridge on Pearl Street, and the north of Franklin Square, the 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue elevated lines diverged. The 2nd Avenue L stayed on the main level. The 3rd Avenue L moved into the middle and rose to the upper level of Chatham Square. This is Chatham Square from the 2nd Avenue L platform on the South Ferry branch, looking toward the tower at the junction of Pearl and Division Streets. The 2nd Avenue L operated on Division Street for one very long block all the way over to Allen Street. And here we are looking out the front of a northbound 2nd Avenue train coming around the curve from Division Street into Allen Street, looking at Canal Street Station. This truss bridge spanned Delancey Street after Delancey Street was widened out to make it an approach to the Williamsburg Bridge. Notice the old New York City Omnibus Corporation yellow coach in the picture there. We continue farther north on the 2nd Avenue L on Allen Street. This is First Street Station, where Allen Street becomes First Avenue. So this station is at First Avenue and First Street. There's a northbound 2nd Avenue Express as seen from our local train, looking north toward the 14th Street Station, probably from Rivington Street Station. 14th and 86th Street were the two double-deck elevated stations on the 2nd Avenue L. The other express stations were single level. Here we are approaching 14th Street Station on the local level, following another train close behind. On the Manhattan L's, there were no block signals on the local tracks. We are looking north here from 14th Street Station. Now, actually, we're looking south. Here's a northbound 2nd Avenue Express just arrived at 14th Street upper level and now is pulling out heading north. Up in the distance may be seen the 19th Street local station, and way beyond that may be seen the curve at 23rd Street, where the 2nd Avenue L curved from 1st Avenue over to 2nd Avenue. 19th Street was a local station. There's a northbound local leaving. This sign was typical of those on all the Manhattan elevated lines. A street scene along 1st Avenue south of 23rd Street. Notice the round wrought iron or cast iron pillars which were typical of 2nd and 9th Avenue L construction. This northbound local is turning from 1st Avenue northward into 23rd Street westward to get over that block from 1st Avenue to 2nd Avenue. Now we're doing the same thing on a northbound express. We're rounding the curve northbound at 23rd Street and 1st Avenue. The 23rd Street station was in the middle of the block, as seen here, and the 3rd Avenue L's 23rd Street station, which was an express station, may be seen one block farther west. Now we're rounding the curve from 23rd Street into 2nd Avenue and heading north on 2nd Avenue. There's the Daily News building. We're approaching 42nd Street station, which was a single-level, two-platform express station. There's a northbound express leaving the middle track, leaving on the middle track from 42nd Street, and there's 42nd Street looking west with the 3rd Avenue L station and a trolley on 42nd Street, the Chrysler building. A view of a northbound local train. The conductor has just pulled the bell cord, signaling the next conductor to pull his bell cord and that it's time to move, and he thus signals the motorman as the bell signal is passed through the train. This is 50th Street Station with a northbound express turning in front of us, heading for Queens. This is 59th Street, and as you can see, the portion north of here has already been demolished. But we've turned from 59th Street onto the Queensboro Bridge and are heading over the bridge to Queensboro Plaza. From here, our train might continue either to Astoria or to Corona. We're on the lower level at Queensboro Plaza now, looking at Manhattan-bound trains. There's a Manhattan-bound 2nd Avenue L train from either Astoria or Corona, heading back over the bridge, which we shall proceed to do. Now we're riding a train from the lower level of the IRT half of the Queensboro Plaza station back across the Queensboro Bridge in 1942, remember. After the L tracks were removed, another automobile roadway was built where the L tracks had been, but that was done after the Second World War. The two-lane automobile roadway on the left had been built in the 1920s or 30s. We're back in Manhattan now, rounding the curve off the Queensboro Bridge into the 57th Street station. This was not an express station. The express track passed right through it on the main level. The upper level was only for inbound trains from Queens. We come down now to 50th Street Junction, and we're heading downtown rather quickly. Here's the curve at 23rd Street and 2nd Avenue again, turning into 23rd Street, passing the 23rd Street station in the block, and then turning onto 1st Avenue again to head southbound. 14th Street station again, this time on the local track. Looking southward from the 14th Street lower level, passing Canal Street station as we turn onto Division Street from Allen Street and head back over to Chatham Square. Now at Chatham Square, the trains could take either the branch to City Hall or the branch to South Ferry, passing under the 3rd Avenue L's branch from South Ferry, as you see being done here. This 2nd Avenue train is turning into the South Ferry branch, on the lower level of the double-deck station on the South Ferry branch. This train is heading straight across the junction, passing under the 3rd Avenue L and heading toward the City Hall branch. Here's another look at the junction at Division Street and Pearl Street. This train again is turning into the South Ferry branch, but the City Hall branch may be seen off on the right. There's the lower level of the Chatham Square station, which was for 2nd Avenue trains. The upper level was for 3rd Avenue trains. And heading south, the two levels merged and the 2nd and 3rd Avenue tracks joined at Franklin Square, right under the Brooklyn Bridge. We have two views of that arrival at Franklin Square station. Now we head south from Franklin Square. The next station would be Fulton Street, then Hanover Square, and then South Ferry again. Ahead was a flagman warning us of some work being done on the portion of the line here, probably in preparation for discontinuation of 2nd Avenue service, although 3rd Avenue L service would continue on this South Ferry branch until 1950. Here's a northbound work train on Pearl Street in the financial district and a southbound 2nd Avenue local. You can see the discontinuation notices posted in the side windows. The Coenty Slip curve between Hanover Square and South Ferry brought the 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue L tracks around a spectacular S-curve leading from Pearl Street to Front Street. And as the dwarf signal changes there, we move down into the South Ferry station for the last time and conclude our look at the 2nd Avenue L in color in 1942. Now we're up in the Bronx at East 180th Street. The old New York, Westchester, and Boston Railway Terminal at Morris Park Avenue and East 180th Street has become the Dyer Avenue Shuttle's south end. The shuttle trains consisted of former elevated cars with open platforms and gates, and they left from the former New York, Westchester, and Boston's northbound platform at East 180th Street, the connection to the main IRT line not having been made yet. This is late 1940s, early 1950s, before the station platforms were extended. The NYW and B platforms could handle 5-car trains with the end cars overlapping. The IRT shuttle consisted mostly of 2-car trains. Occasionally, in snowy weather, 4-car trains would be run, but they still did not need the whole length of the station. And you'll notice on these station platforms, such as that one at Gun Hill Road, the ends of the station platforms are fenced off in the areas away from the stairways because, as you see here, that fence on the right divided the unused area from the area that was used by the shuttle trains. This is Dyer Avenue Terminal, where the northbound platform was used just as the terminal station for both directions, but the southbound platform had not yet been demolished. We had a quick view of it there as it stood forlorn and abandoned and trackless. Here's a northbound Dyer Avenue train arriving at Dyer Avenue, and now we are looking out the rear of what is probably that same train as it heads south out of Dyer Avenue, crosses the bridge and takes the switch to get over to the southbound side. There's the old Dyer Avenue terminal as it appeared before the reconstruction into the present form. Here's a southbound train as seen from the Eastchester Road Bridge, and a northbound shuttle train as seen from the same bridge. We are looking at the Dyer Avenue shuttle coming southbound into the 180th Street NYW and B terminal. We're standing on the Bronx River Parkway Bridge, which was under construction at that time. And here is the train arriving not at the IRT main station, which is in the background, but at the old NYW&B platform. One track was used for the shuttle in both directions. Except at this station, fares were collected on the train using a Johnson fare box bolted to the car at the conductor's position between the two cars. The overhead ramp may be seen there, ready to be placed in service, connecting the Dyer Avenue line with the IRT, but it is not yet in use. We're looking from the top of an apartment building on Bronxdale Avenue at a northbound shuttle train crossing the Bronxdale Avenue Bridge, passing by the old Bronxdale swimming pool and heading north up into the Morris Park station. The Morris Park station had 3 levels. An entrance from Colden Avenue at the southern end, which was never used or very seldom used, a main level with the tracks, and an entrance from the Esplanade up at the upper level, which was the main entrance for years. Now we're leaving from 180th Street, the old NYW&B terminal, looking out the front of a train, showing the old track arrangement that brought southbound trains into the same platform. And we're heading north past the yard trackage, which had been the New York, Westchester, and Boston's Unionport yards and shops. Some of the tracks were still used by the IRT for car storage, as you can see on the right. There's the old yard office building, and beyond it the NYW&B's Unionport repair shop building, which was used by the New York City Transit System for many years. On the left may be seen the ramp, which by the early 1950s had already been built to connect the southbound Dyer Avenue line with the southbound IRT main line, but it is not yet in service, as the view of the track on the left shows. Now we continue northward past the Unionport shop area. In the distance is the Morris Park station. On the left, the white building is the Bronxdale swimming pool at Bronxdale Avenue. As we arrive at the Morris Park station, you will notice that the portion of the platform south of the tunnel portal is the part that's used for service. The portion of the station platforms in the tunnel at that time was fenced off so that the public would not await a train there and then be disappointed to find that the train stopped at the other part of the station south of the fence. There's the fence just plainly visible on the right as we head into the tunnel. Emerging from the tunnel at the north end at Mace Avenue, this portion of the Dyer Avenue line still appears quite similar today, although there is a double crossover at this point now. And looking northward from the top of the portal at Mace Avenue, there's a southbound train on the left, and in the upper center, way up in the distance, is the Gun Hill Road station. On the right is a northbound shuttle train of the 2-car elevated cars that were made surplus from the abandonment of the 9th Avenue elevated and some of the 2nd Avenue elevated in 1940. These cars were all motor cars. There were no trailers. They were refurbished and equipped with subway-type third rail shoes, and the Dyer Avenue line was equipped with subway-type third rail. This is Baychester Avenue as a southbound train arrives back at a time when this portion of the Bronx appeared much more rural. Here's Holler's Ice Pond, long since filled in. The Holler family used to cut blocks of ice from this pond in the wintertime and supplied ice to homes and shops all over the Bronx. 222nd Street, as it was in those days, with a southbound dinky, as we used to call the 2-car shuttle trains, passing over the bridge through what was then a very rural section of the northeast Bronx. Today it's much more built up. Baychester Avenue again, looking northwestward with a southbound train leaving the station in the days before the platforms were extended. When the platforms were extended to accommodate 10-car subway trains, the southern end of the Baychester Avenue southbound platform came almost to the old NYW&B Baychester Avenue Tower, which you saw at the upper left there very briefly. The tower has since been demolished, but the foundations can still be seen just south of the south end of the present platform. North of Dyer Avenue was the Kingsbridge Road station in Mount Vernon. These two stations were very close together, but they were in different fare zones, being across the city line from each other. Back at East 180th Street, sometime around 1954 or 55, the wooden L cars were replaced by surplus steel subway cars of the high-voltage control type, which were made surplus from the Broadway line and Pelham Bay line by delivery of the post-war IRT cars. These steel subway cars rattled a lot more than the L cars did, and they served the Dyer Avenue line until 1957, when track connections were finally made with the main IRT at East 180th Street. Here's a two-car shuttle train of the steel subway cars arriving at the old NYW&B's northbound platform at East 180th Street. These cars had manual door controls, as you see there. The conductor manipulates the lever to close the doors, pulls the bell cord to tell the motorman it's all right to start, and away we go northbound, leaving from East 180th Street, the old NYW&B station. As before, we pass the Unionport yards and shops. This time we look out over some of the houses in the area. There on the left is the ramp being prepared to connect the Dyer Avenue line southbound with the IRT main line, but not yet in service. Approaching Morris Park Station again. The south part of the two platforms out in the open air and the daylight were the portions that were used for shuttle train service. There you can see again the fence at the right there, fencing off the portion of the platform in the tunnel. These fences were removed, of course, when the platforms were extended to accommodate 10-car subway trains. A two-car shuttle train in the Pelham Parkway station, completely within the tunnel under Pelham Parkway and the Esplanade. And heading north now from Pelham Parkway Station, we emerge into daylight again at the North Tunnel portal at Mace Avenue. A northbound train emerging from the tunnel portal and heading up toward Gun Hill Road. And arriving at Gun Hill Road. Notice the fence across the portion of the platform which was not used for service. There's the Johnson fare box, which was mounted in the train in the vestibule of the cars to collect fares at all stations except East 180th Street. Looking north from Eastchester Road at a train heading northbound, and this train is approaching Baychester Avenue Station, again with part of the platform fenced off, the portion near the stairway being the portion in use. We pull north from Baychester Avenue and pass through an area with tourist cabins, an early form of motel, in what was then the rural Bronx, very near the Boston Post Road, which was the main highway between New York City and the New England area in those days. There's the Boston Post Road as we cross over it. No New England Thruway at that time. There's the two-car shuttle train heading north into Dyer Avenue terminal. And as seen from such a train, we're heading north into the Dyer Avenue terminal. The old abandoned southbound platform is still standing on the left, but it's the northbound platform on the right, which is the one that's used for service, both arriving and departing trains. Notice the fence again on the right, which fenced off the farther part of the platform away from the stairways. A northbound train arrives and departs from Dyer Avenue. And so, with this view of the southbound train heading away from Dyer Avenue, we conclude our look at the Dyer Avenue Shuttle. Now let's go over to another part of the Bronx and Manhattan for a look at the Polo Grounds Shuttle, which was the remains of the 9th Avenue and 6th Avenue elevated line. This is looking from the 155th Street Bridge down at the remains of the 155th Street elevated station, which was completely truncated here. In the days when the 6th and 9th Avenue Ls were running, there were stairways with entrances from the McCombs Dam Bridge, the 155th Street Bridge, down to both L platforms. But by this time, the old southbound platform had been completely removed, and the northbound platform had been shortened, eliminating the stairways from the McCombs Dam Bridge. We're riding a train over the Putnam Bridge from 155th Street to Sedgwick Avenue. Sedgwick Avenue station is what we see here, and the overhead footbridge was the connection to the New York Central Railroad's Putnam Division Terminal, which is the platform that you saw right there, which was built in 1916. Prior to that time, Putnam Division steam-drawn trains came over the Putnam Bridge into the 155th Street L terminal. But in 1916, the connection to the Jerome Avenue line was built so that 6th and 9th Avenue elevated trains could use the Putnam Bridge, and the Putnam Division had its own terminal then on the Bronx side of the river. Here's the Anderson and Jerome Avenue station. This station had 3 entrances, one at Anderson Avenue above grade and 2 entrances from Jerome Avenue below grade, only one of which was normally used. We've come across next to 162nd Street and are merging with the Jerome Avenue IRT line, an extension of the Lexington Avenue subway, and we come up to grade, join with the IRT tracks which come in from the right, and pull up into the 167th Street station. 6th and 9th Avenue expresses used to run all the way up to Burnside Avenue, and in rush hours a few of them went as far as Fordham Road. But the shuttle, which originally went to Burnside Avenue beginning in 1940, was soon cut back to 167th Street and used the switches just north of 167th Street to turn back. As you see here, this 2-car shuttle train is using the switches into the middle track, and after a southbound Lexington Avenue Express passes, the shuttle train will use the switches in the foreground to come into the southbound track for its journey back to 155th Street. 2 Lexington Avenue, Jerome Avenue Expresses pass, and here we are on the northbound platform at 167th Street, watching a 2-car shuttle train from 155th Street come up the ramp and head north into the station. Now we are heading back southbound on the northbound shuttle track. During the last year of operation, about 1959, the Giants had already moved out of the Polo Grounds, and the Putnam Division passenger service had ended. And service on this shuttle was down to 1 train on 1 track. They chose to use the former northbound track for both directions, and the former southbound track was abandoned. So here we are heading westward, or southward, actually, on the former northbound track, the Anderson Avenue station, now the Sedgwick Avenue station. Notice the rusty rails on the abandoned former southbound track on the right. We head back across the two-track Putnam Bridge to the 155th Street station. The signs still remain to Polo Grounds. There are the destination signs in the cars of the shuttle, 155th Street on the lower and 167th Street Jerome Avenue on the upper signs. This train has just left 155th Street on that same track and is heading back toward the Bronx now, rounding the curve and heading over the Putnam Bridge. And into the Sedgwick Avenue station. Here we are at Sedgwick Avenue, watching a four-car train approach northbound. This scene was taken before the southbound track was abandoned, and the four-car train was run during a week, I believe in 1958, when the Jehovah's Witnesses had a huge convention in Yankee Stadium. The additional cars were used on the shuttle in order to accommodate the crowds of conventioneers. This is Jerome Avenue with the shuttle station crossing over Jerome Avenue. The main entrance from Jerome Avenue was on the left and had turnstiles. The entrance on the right was an auxiliary entrance which had been built there but which had never been equipped for turnstiles and was only used during conventions such as this and especially crowded ball games when tickets would be sold and the passengers would pay their fares by buying tickets and depositing them in chopper boxes. The last place on the IRT or any part of the New York City transit system where tickets were regularly used for fare entrance. Between the Jerome Avenue station and the IRT's Jerome Avenue line, at this point on River Avenue, the shuttle structure paralleled 162nd Street and turned northward into the IRT's Jerome Avenue line. There is a southbound IRT Lexington Avenue Express on the upper level, passing over the junction with the old 9th Avenue L, now reduced to the 155th Street Polo Grounds Shuttle. Here's that four-car train again, and apparently the service had already been cut back to just the one train on one track because the four-car shuttle train is heading southward on the northbound track, dipping under the main IRT Jerome Avenue line, turning through the park just north of 162nd Street on the former northbound track and heading into the Anderson and Jerome Avenue stations. This was another station with three levels, the track level in the middle, Anderson Avenue up above, and Jerome Avenue down below. Notice the lineups of buses there during this convention week when the Jehovah's Witnesses convention was held at Yankee Stadium. The four-car train operated probably late in 1958 or in 1959 because the service was here reduced to one train shuttling back and forth on what had been the northbound track. Looking east from the Anderson Jerome Avenue stations, we see the shuttle train approaching, and you can see on the left the stairway down to the main Jerome Avenue entrance, and in the distance where the three transverse light bulbs are, the auxiliary entrance from the east side of Jerome Avenue, which was open at this time. Sedgwick Avenue station again, still with the train service reduced to one train on one track. There's the footbridge leading to the abandoned Putnam Division station, which is out of the picture to the left. Notice the rail fans standing on the sandbox there, capturing pictures of the one-track operation, which they knew was soon going to end completely. There's the Polo Grounds as we come around the curve off the Putnam Bridge and head down into the one remaining platform of the 155th Street station. You can see here how the platform had been shortened. Originally, that platform and its companion on the other side had extended down to the 155th Street Bridge, with stairways leading from the bridge to the platforms with turnstiles and entrances, as well as entrances from the street level. This was one very busy station in the days of the elevated train service. To mitigate the loss of the L service, the New York City Transit System instituted a paper transfer at 155th Street to the 155th Street station of the IND Concourse subway. There's a quick glimpse of that later on as the camera swings around to it. These are various views from the 155th Street station looking toward the Bronx. There's a New York Central commuter train southbound on the other side of the river, composed of multiple unit cars built in 1950. And here are the remains. There's the subway entrance down at street level, from which a paper transfer was issued to the shuttle. And there's a shuttle train heading out of 155th Street over toward the Bronx, crossing the Putnam Division, most likely in 1959. A round Manhattan boat passes under the Putnam Bridge and brings an end to our look at the Polo Grounds Shuttle. Now let's go over to the 3rd Avenue L in Manhattan and the Bronx. Between 1950 and 1956, the 3rd Avenue L used, in addition to the Manhattan elevated cars, trains of BMT Type Q, or Queens cars. These BMT cars had been rebuilt from open gate cars built in the 1900s and 1910s. They were rebuilt into enclosed cars with sliding doors and multiple unit door control in 1938 for service on the Corona line from Queensboro Plaza to the New York World's Fair of 1939 and 40. They remained on the Flushing line in service between Queensboro Plaza and Main Street, Flushing, until 1950, when they were brought over to the IRT, equipped with trucks from the motor cars of the former wooden-bodied IRT subway cars, which had seen service on the 2nd and 3rd Avenue Ls, and the Q cars then replaced the old IRT wooden-bodied subway cars in express service. We've come down from the Bronx from around 166th Street. We're leaving 149th Street, looking out the back window of a train, heading around the curve at 144th Street into the 143rd Street station. The Q cars were used primarily for express service in morning and evening rush hours, and like their predecessors, the IRT wooden-bodied subway cars, they were considered too heavy to carry passengers on the local tracks. Therefore, they had to deadhead on the local tracks to reach their starting points for express service. Since the Manhattan elevated lines had no yards in downtown Manhattan, the trains had to be deadheaded down the local tracks for the evening rush hour from the uptown yards and deadheaded back to the uptown yards in the morning rush hour. All this deadhead operation was very labor intensive, used a great deal of electric power, and was one of the reasons why the New York City Transit System wanted to eliminate this operation. This is the 138th Street station, and now we're looking at a southbound train heading from the Bronx into Manhattan over the 2nd Avenue Bridge, which was a two-level bridge with two tracks on each level. A southbound local of Manhattan elevated cars comes around the curve over the New Haven yards from 133rd Street station to the bridge. And crosses over the bridge into Manhattan, where it will continue down the 3rd Avenue line. A northbound local, as seen from the main level of the bridge heading away from us over the 133rd Street New Haven Railroad yards, south of 132nd Street actually, and a southbound train approaching from the 133rd Street station around the curve over the yards and over the bridge. Here's a train of Q cars as rebuilt for IRT operations, still with the high clear stories on the roofs. Clear stories would not be lowered on these cars until they were returned to the BMT for service on the Myrtle Avenue Elevated, but that's a story for another time. For now, these BMT Q cars were coupled into trains of 3 cars each, motor, trailer, motor, and for express service they were used in 2 trains connected to form a 6-car train. No more 7-car trains operated after the Qs were brought over to the 3rd Avenue L. This is looking south from Canal Street at a southbound 3rd Avenue Express, probably deadheading from the local track into the City Hall station, which was still operated at least up until 1953. Now, having picked up its passengers in the evening rush hour, a train of Q cars from City Hall comes through Chatham Square and up the middle track into the Canal Street station. Not all 3rd Avenue Expresses, even in the Q car era, were composed of Q cars. There were still some expresses of Manhattan elevated cars, although they tended to be local expresses, whereas the Q cars tended to cover all of the 3rd Avenue through express runs. This train of Q cars has come from the upper level of Chatham Square station and has pulled north into the Canal Street Express track. Now we're heading north on the L with a southbound train of Q cars deadheading downtown, and we're riding the express track through 34th Street station, still with its overhead footbridge left over from the days when there was a shuttle from the 3rd Avenue L over to the Long Island Railroad ferries at the East River. That train of Q cars there was another southbound deadhead run, passing right through 34th Street without stopping. This is way up at the northern end of the Manhattan portion of the 3rd Avenue L at 129th Street. The large complex of platforms has already been torn down, leaving just 2 platforms which were abandoned at the time and used only by workers. This train of Q cars has turned off 3rd Avenue on the upper express level, is headed across 129th Street, and is now turning onto the 2nd Avenue Bridge in order to head over to the Bronx. On the far right may be seen the stubs of the 2nd Avenue Elevated on both levels, where the 2nd Avenue L structure had been cut away. Looking from the sidewalk on the main level of the bridge, we see a northbound 3rd Avenue Express of Q cars has just come off the bridge and is heading over the New Haven Railroad's Harlem River freight yards and around the curve into the 133rd Street station. Now let's do that same thing from a moving train. We have left 125th Street upper level and are headed northbound on the 3rd Avenue L Express. We're crossing along 129th Street and turning from 129th Street into the upper level of the 2nd Avenue Bridge over to the Bronx. We pass over the New Haven Railroad's Harlem River freight yards, and the low building at the right with the peaked roof is the former New York, Westchester, and Boston Railway Terminal, now shorn of its passageway. North of the 138th Street station, we see a ramp leading from the upper level to the lower level in between the main tracks. Notice that the rails are all corroded here. That ramp had not been used for many, many years, but would soon be used again when the middle track at 149th Street was bridged over to make a wide continuous platform in preparation for abandonment of service south of 149th Street. We're looking at a train leaving 143rd Street station. The stump of the abandoned Bergen Avenue connection was just seen on the right, and this train is turning from the private right-of-way onto 3rd Avenue. And as it makes the turn from 143rd to 144th Streets, it descends to main track level. Now, here is the 149th Street station with the center track still in use, safety striping still in place and appears to be fresh. Southbound expresses in the morning and northbound expresses in the evening would use the middle track, and local expresses would cut over to or from the local track north of 149th Street. Through expresses would continue up to Tremont Avenue on the middle track. Now we are leaving 138th Street upper level northbound and swinging over into that ramp which had been put back in service in 1954 or early 1955 to bring 3rd Avenue through expresses down to the local level, forcing them to share trackage with the local trains from 143rd Street to north of 149th Street. This train of Q cars is a northbound express which is on the local level approaching 149th Street, and there's a quick view here of the construction showing the bridging over of the former express track pit at 149th Street, as you can see there. North of 149th Street, the through expresses moved back into the middle track. Through express service was continued right to the last day of operation, Thursday, May 12, 1955. Here's a northbound through express of Q cars coming around the curve at 161st Street, passing right through the station. Its next stop will be Tremont Avenue. North of Tremont Avenue, it will move over to the local track and make all stops to Gun Hill Road. A northbound train of Q cars on a through express passes a southbound train of Manhattan cars on a downtown local at the 161st Street S curve. The building on the left is the old Bronx County Courthouse, at this time used as the Bronx Criminal Courts building. Tremont Avenue, and we see a southbound train of Manhattan L cars, either a local or local express, leaving, and we will see a northbound train of Q cars on a through express. Occasionally a train of Manhattan elevated cars would be used on a through express, but usually they were used only on the local expresses, which made all stops north of 149th Street. When the Q cars were brought over to the IRT, the classification lamps had to be moved from the outer parts of the roof to the clear story of the roof so that they would not interfere with the overhang of the IRT platform canopies. This is another northbound train of Q cars on a through express pulling into Tremont Avenue. And leaving Tremont Avenue northbound, it will continue up to just south of 180th Street and then move over into the local track. Hopefully that local train on the local track will wait for it to do so. Yes, you see that being done here. Now let's head back downtown. We're on the L between 138th Street and 143rd, and we're going to take another ride northbound on that ramp that leads from the upper level to the lower. The reverse operation was done in the morning rush hour, of course, with express trains using the local track at 149th and 143rd Streets and then moving upgrade to the express level on this ramp. We're on a northbound 3rd Avenue local or local express. We've just left 156th Street station and are heading around the curve that 3rd Avenue follows to get over to 161st Street. The trains on the middle track there are in layup, so this is either midday or a Saturday or a Sunday. After the closing of the 179th Street yard, the middle track had to be used for layup trains on weekends and in off hours. In effect, the middle track became the yard track, except during rush hours. Leaving 161st Street, there is Boston Road forking off from 3rd Avenue on the right. We began our journey on the 3rd Avenue L in this area in the 160s, and we will end it here with a last look at a train of Manhattan L cars, and having seen the Q cars on this line during the 5 years they ran here, we will bring the trip to an end. There's the 166th Street station. The Q cars were used on the 3rd Avenue L in the Bronx, north of 149th Street, for about a year after the 1955 abandonment of the portion of the line south of 149th Street. Then the Q cars were replaced with steel IRT subway cars, which made twice as much noise. How well I remember that. So we bring to an end this film of various different Manhattan elevated lines, and we hope you have enjoyed it.